that he's doing within the CYBERPOL, and he will explain to us what is CYBERPOL, because I guess a lot of people will have questions about this.
I'm sure.
Ricardo,
Thank you so much.
the floor is yours.
Well, hopefully I won't bore you in the last part of the day. But I'm going to talk to you the critical border cyber defense infrastructure. And as you can see there, the critical border cyber defense infrastructure. The threat of a cyber attack is one of the most serious economic and national security threats nations faces today that threatens our critical infrastructure and the ability to secure our infrastructure effectively. Now that's factual. If we ignore the threat, we are looking for problems. But most important is, what do we understand? What do we understand about the critical border cyber defense infrastructure? Is it banking? Is it borders? Is it energy? Is it oil? Is it water? A lot needs to be discussed about what do we understand, because critical infrastructures is not necessarily how we see it. It could be a little bit more to what the eye meets. Perhaps more than any other type of crime, cybercrime respects no borders. It has no borders. It has no law. It doesn't care what we do or think. But cybercrime continues to active. Now I'm going to speak to you quickly, meet Sally. Have anybody heard the story about Sally? Well, Sally is a 5-year-old. She loves her computer. But she also loves social network. And every day after school, she's on the computer. But she has a friend on the other side of the world on social media. And this friend is sending her messages. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that cyber criminals in Russia can have a colleague in Ukraine, use a service in the United Kingdom, and target users in the United States, and get an innocent child to bring down a country's critical infrastructure. And that's factual. We have to pay attention to these kind of problems. How do we know this? Well, let's start with the banking a little bit. We all know about the 100 banks that was hacked last year. And we all know that only 6-7 months later, the data was discovered. But let's talk about the recent hacking one, 2015. I do not know how many people knows about this bank hack that took place 2 weeks ago. Now, we know that presumably information intelligence indicate it was probably terrorist, and notion is very strong that it was a terrorist organization behind. But have we not noticed the hack while it was contagious and continuing at the same point? The banks would have lost over $1 billion. And that's key. Now, why are they doing this? Now, I'm going to bring your attention to a presentation that I did to military department in Belgium. This is declassified, so I can speak about it. On 27th, 10th, 2014, we made a presentation. This is an actual official copy of the slide that we made. And look at our list. These are the signals we indicated. That something is happening, something out of the ordinary, and something large is imminent to happen. And the first thing we said, questioned, are they going to target the banking system? Isn't it ironic that 6 months later, the banking industry was attacked? Now, how did we know this? But we've also included other possibilities. Agriculture system, the energy system, the commission is at risk, policy directive, and the entire economical system of the EU is at risk. And this is fundamental important information. So how did we know this? How did ECIPS and CYBERPOL know this? Well, we focus on atmospherics. Anybody here knows what atmospherics is? Nobody. Okay, well, another word for it is real-time information. Atmospherics was implemented by AFRICOM in the US. Very effective used in Afghan. Is the ability to create a structure whereby information in real time is gathered and fed into the system and from there on monitored. So with other words, the maximum time delay is 4 to 5 minutes on information. And that's really a powerful tool. Now, apply that to the security grid or cyber grid, we have a different structure in place. Let's focus on something slightly different. On 8th March 2014, we all know about the Boeing carrying the passengers, the Malaysian passengers. Right. Much speculation about this, whether it was a terrorist issue or in fact hacked. But there's very strong notion, indication that this could have been a hacking involvement or somehow hacked. How do we know this? Well, after the question arose and was posed to ECIPS and said, well, can we look into this? Can we have a bit deeper investigation into this? ECIPS and CYBERPOL decided to take on the investigation and look a little bit more closely to what could be the problems in this. And what did we find? Well, we found something. The ECIPS study found that all the airports of 28 European countries, not excluding Malaysian airports, as a loophole or a loophole exists, providing access to critical cyber infrastructure that allows border access without noticeable traces. Now, this is really serious. Now, I'm going to just go a step back. I don't know if some in the room may be aware of this, but the US intelligence sources confirmed recently that ISIS has been using Battlefield 4 to train and plan for full-scale invasion of the US homeland 2014. But what they failed to tell us was how did they get the access? Because you have to have internet access to play this particular game. You have to have the critical infrastructure access somehow to be able to look at this. Now, what does this all mean in short? Well, it was found that Wi-Fi and mobile data in airports and Wi-Fi hotspots are not monitored for sensitive data traffic except in the USA by the NSA and in Germany limited to certain structures in Germany only. Has anybody traveled recently to Germany? If you do, you would find that your mobile presently data will not work there. You can go anywhere in Europe, but if you go to Germany, you have to have a German mobile card to get your data on your phone. That means they've woken up. But the risk. This increases the risk of cyber hacking dramatically from international airports, space, and Wi-Fi hotspots on the critical infrastructure of the EU and any other country vulnerable to this problem. The added problem. Well, we have the mobile devices. That gives us an added problem to the Wi-Fi because now with smartphones we can have our own hotspots. We don't need any more a physical hotspot. We can create our own virtual hotspot. And cyber attackers know this. What is most alarming is that according to the research, there's no Wi-Fi or mobile data transfer backups at any airport, and at the same time, there is no package filtering or collecting of data done, making it a perfect place for international sabotage of any critical infrastructure or crime syndicates. I don't know how many in this room is aware of this, but I assume only a few might be aware of this critical problem. Did you know that Europe is the world's largest multinational network of free Wi-Fi hotspots? With over 5 million free Wi-Fi hotspots across Europe that can be used by terrorists anytime. That's a real big problem if you look at that number. And this number is about to grow. They estimate that this number will be more than double over the next 5.5 years. So, the problem. Well, an example, high-flyer cyber hackers can literally stay on the run without any trace whilst this vulnerability is being exploited by terrorist and crime syndicates organizations. Now, that makes it really hard to catch any criminals because by the time we get the location, they are in another location. The threats are not limited to airport security, but extends to energy, transport, telecom, and IT communications as well. It's estimated by ECIPS, and this is studies we have done, that the EU has over 1.2 million free Wi-Fi telecom hotspots alone. That means it's hotspots provided by the telecom services. Now, they might require passwords or information to access, but a basic hacker can access them anyway. And it's a common structure today that hackers don't pay to access these hotspots. The same free unmonitored Wi-Fi supply leaves all our critical infrastructure doors open for espionage, as mentioned by our colleagues. And data theft, as recently demonstrated in the leaks from former National Security Agency NSA contractor Edward Snowden. I hope we don't have the Snowden syndrome today. Where it was supported that, or purported that China stole the patents of the new F-35. Now, which EU countries have implemented Wi-Fi restrictions? Does anybody know? Except Germany has tried. But at this moment, technically, nobody. There is no law that exists. There's no structure in place. There's no monitoring done. And it's a free breeding ground. Now, when criminals do business, the first thing they need is to have the tools. And we give them the tools. And that's a real problem, because these tools give them access. From the 28 member states, Germany is the only country that has implemented a partial Wi-Fi restriction and data monitoring system. This after their official mobile phones data were hacked by the NSA during 2014. So actually the NSA did them a favor to tell them, hi guys, we've got to change this. What is the problem with the Wi-Fi? Well, it provides access to global internet, often without any real identification, can be found in over 5 million locations in the EU, of which some runs via VPN services. I'm sure most people know what a VPN is. But almost all these structures exist. They give access. We have problems with stolen data, plans, maps. It could very well be that the hacker who used a Wi-Fi hotspot, unknown, and redirected his IP and MAC via China's authority that was based in a critical infrastructure, who used this to steal the F-35 data for financial gain, sold to an opposition of the manufacturer perhaps. But the point is that this is a real threat. The point is that this threat has been ignored. And the point is this threat is directed at the critical infrastructure at the same time. Control. Well, we have a little philosophy. We call it little control means many problems to be solved, and too much assumption leads to much destruction. The fact is, we don't manage our cyber risk assessment appropriately and need to be very vigilant about it to protect our critical infrastructure. And that is something we have to pay attention to. Anybody knows now, anybody know how many cyber attacks, or does anybody know how many cyber attacks at present in the EU? Now I've put it there for you. I normally had it in a separate slide. Well, this figure changed. In fact, the highest recorded was just under 14 million per day, and that was in the last 2 months. And that figure has rapidly increased over the last 2 years. In fact, if you look 2 years ago, it was less than 1 million a day. So it's increased more than 1,000 times. How many wake-up calls do we need? How many wake-up calls do we need before serious urgency is given to cyber threat management before we see a cyber attack on our critical infrastructure on a scale of 9/11? Or worse, such as the 446 nuclear plants in our backyards. Now, many of you are perhaps not aware of this, but we have 446 nuclear plants stretched within 80 miles of each other across Europe. And this is a critical infrastructure that is a recipe for disaster if not paid attention to today. Present cyber intelligence. What is intelligence says? Well, and this intelligence concurs with also the US and other parts of Europe. Recent intelligence analysts indicates that ISIS is exploring cyberspace, its borders and the border vulnerabilities such as Wi-Fi and hotspot access near borders. How big is the threat? Can we really measure the threat? And do we understand how big this threat or the size of the threat is? Well, the problem. The lack of understanding the cyber language and what to look for, the understanding of the cyber threat, in other words, we're not really studying it correctly or explore it to the point that we should be, understanding the profile of the risk, the lack of tools to combat cyber crimes, and the lack of ability to speak the IT language and culture. Now, this is the important part, the IT language and culture. When terrorists or criminal organizations learn to speak that culture, you can't ignore that culture because that culture has become universal. Our solutions. Well, we think more education programs is necessary, public awareness programs, cooperation, PPS, public-private partnerships, absolute necessity. More research with functional deliverables are necessary. Training and education for law enforcement officers and cyber risk are paramount in the day and age of our computer industry we live in. If we ignore these basic things, then we are ignoring the solution to the basic problem. The studies we have done recently indicate that the majority of people who is in a position where they have to take responsibility for the office computer has no idea how to secure that computer. 1 out of every 1,000 has a basic idea of what to do. And 1 out of every maybe 2,000 knows a basic action to take when they are hacked. Well, I'm not going to go too much into this, but I'm going to focus on one of these 4 levels of cyber terror. ECIPS identified 4 levels of cyber terror capability, and I think my colleague there correctly from Europol touched on one of the points. Simple, unstructured, advanced structured, complex coordinated, and complex DoD level. Now, we're going to focus on the third one for a fraction of a minute, because this fits into the structure here today. Complex coordinated. What does it mean? The capability to conduct sophisticated attacks against multiple systems or networks of critical infrastructure. The organization who does such attacks possesses an advanced target analysis, command and control, and execution of attack capability. But in other words, they know what they do. They are not the ordinary black hat or gray hat hacker. They are the guys who's trained by both. They work on both sides. They know both sides. And they know what they have to target and how to target it. Cyber terrorism targets. Well, government. Well, let's focus for a minute on government. What do they target in a government? They don't target the police. They don't target the bank of the government. They target the national state security. So anything direct in a critical infrastructure attack would be to target the national state security. Why? Because if they affect that, they affect the nation. When they affect the nation, they get control. Banking, that's second. TV stations, radios is also on the list. Media, newspapers. Newspapers is a big target. We have recently seen what's happening. Borders, traffic control, infrastructures. So there's a whole range of problems we have to look at. I hopefully won't bore you too long still. The risk link, the Wi-Fi. It provides anonymous access across the internet around the globe with no way of being identified, nor monitored, or ever been tracked, increasing our risk of cyber attack in a critical infrastructure beyond the point of control or risk management. Now, how can we make such a statement? Well, it's very simple, in fact. Very few of the real crimes that happen can be prosecuted because the real problem is tracking, the real identification, the real IP. Because IP, the actual address of the tracker is not necessarily the correct address. We have to rethink the way we understand the critical infrastructure and its security. It has to be reinvented, not reinvent the wheel. Implement new policies across the CERT program of the EU, sharing and working as a hive to reduce the risk of any cyber attack. I see there's a mistake. Sorry, my apologies for that. On the critical infrastructure of our countries. So we have to function as one group. That comes back to the coordination. What can we do? Enhance preparation for our law enforcement officers and national security officers. Bring measures to evaluate, assess, and predict both the risk of present and future attacks. Set up cyber police as a supportive liaison for critical infrastructure risk management. That's an absolute necessity. CYBERPOL proposed to implement a cross-border data platform to assist cyber policing and national security across the EU after the Flight 370 incident. Well, there's no time to waste. Our geo borders, unlike the cyber borders, protects the identity of each nation. This is the fundamentals of our human civilization, its existence and its cultural inheritance. Imagine a world without it. We would be lost in a world of no culture, limited to its own expansion and technological evolution only. Thank you. I hope you have got the message on this, and I wanted to be as direct as possible rather than building an illusion and give you all the stats and figures as, in my opinion, of little value to give you something. And if you have any questions, you're most welcome.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you.